Hey leaders, welcome to the People Power Project podcast. I'm your host, Morgan Carey, CEO of Morgan Carey Consulting Solutions, Chief People Developer, and advocate for building better workplaces. This podcast is all about empowering the leader in you, whether you're an individual contributor, a manager, or a business owner, to build better, safer, and more enjoyable work environments. Together, we'll reimagine leadership by promoting accountability, supporting healing, and exploring ways to foster growth for the busy business leader. I'm so excited today because this month marks a new season, but not just on the calendar, but also in this space for the People Power Project. I've been doing a lot of listening to God, myself, and to the women around me, and I've realized that this podcast and my entire work with Morgan Carey Consulting Solutions is shifting just a little bit. So in this season, the People Power Project is not just about leadership in general and reinventing HR, although that's a big part of the People Power Project. It's about women, and specifically Black women like me, leading while carrying real life heartbreak, hardship, and health battles. See, people should love where they work more. I truly believe people should love where they work more. And many times people do not love where they work because they don't like who they work for. And in my recent study and interactions, I found that people often do not like working for Black women. If you follow me on the People Power Project on TikTok, you'll know that I have an actual video where I'm talking about this. And I start with, I will never work for a Black woman leader again. Is something that I've never said. This is exactly how the video starts. I've never said that because my experiences with Black women leaders have been great. I feel like I am a great Black woman leader, but I have run into people, and even on that video, there are comments that say, I have enjoyed it, because the whole purpose of the video was to get some positive reviews about working with Black women. And there were some that were mixed. They said, yes, I've had great experiences and I've had some really bad experiences. And then some people did come on and say, I've had a terrible experience and I'll never do it again. I want to change that because we are often the ones holding it down at work, holding it together at home, and still showing up with a smile when our world is actually on fire behind us. The People Power Project podcast and the People Power Project is now a space for us, a space to grow, to lead, to cry, to laugh, to heal, and do it all together because I know we carry so much with us to the office, at home, and everywhere we are, and we're still expected to show up, smile, and perform just as well or better than our colleagues. And I believe leadership is not just about performance, it's about actual healing and healing while still leading, and still showing up as the best version of ourselves. So if you're a Black woman navigating in the leadership space while also navigating life, this podcast is for you. And even if you aren't a Black woman, stick around because there's something here for you too. We're going to be leading differently, and we're going to be leading whole and leading with our whole selves. I heard a calling for this. And I heard a calling for me to do something different. And it was on my long commute. If you follow me, you know I have a very long commute to my job. And I get to do a lot of thinking, praising, singing, dancing, all kind of things on a 2.5 hour commute to my job during the week. And yes, I said 2.5 hours. It's a long commute. So I got a calling. And in that calling, it says, this is probably the space of how you're going to help someone and make your mark on leadership. Too many times we are silent about the things that we go through. We're scared to let people know for many reasons, and some of them are valid. Some of them are valid reasons because people can be mean. People can be vindictive. People can be hurtful. And so when I was diagnosed with cancer, I wrestled a lot with whether or not to tell people. I remember having a very distinct conversation with my mother, like, are we telling people? Should we tell people? And she's like, it's really up to you. Because I've heard people when they have diagnoses or serious things like cancer and other health challenges where they don't really want to tell anybody. And I don't really know where that comes from, but there's a Bible verse that on James 5:14-15 says, is any sick among you? Let him call the elders of the church and let them pray over you, anointing him with oil in the name of the Lord, and the prayer of the faith shall save the sick. So I decided to tell based on this verse. I was like, let the righteous people pray for me. Okay, let them petition God for me while I petition God for myself because I was scared. Cancer is scary. Okay, so I thought, let me tell the people. When my father passed, I felt the same way. So we shared, people prayed and surrounded me and my family during the passing of my father. There was a lot of love and support. And so it turned out to be great to talk about it during these kinds of times. Now, it was a little bit different when I dealt with romantic relationship challenges. You don't want to tell as much, right? And understandably so, especially sometimes with women, when a relationship or 2 or 3 ends, a lot of times we're worried about what people are going to think. People may be like, what's wrong with her? She can't keep a man. She must be really hard to deal with. All the things. I'm sure there's worse things that people say behind your back. That's just some of the things that I've heard people say. Now, I acknowledge that this conversation, especially the last part about the romantic partnerships, can be a little bit uncomfortable. And this conversation is not about calling people out, making people feel bad about their leadership style or being a Black woman in leadership. But this conversation is about love. It comes out of love for Black women and actually all women leaders. I've heard something over and over, and it sits heavy with me. And I stated it before, that video, I never want to work for another Black woman leader again. And as a Black leader, a Black woman leader, and as someone who believes in our brilliance, this is heartbreaking to me. Another reason why I want to do something about it. I've been sitting with it, and I've had to ask myself, why? Why might someone feel like that? Now, I know we all have had our experiences, and we all have the right to feel the way that we feel. But right now, we're going to talk about the why that may be, but not from a place of blame. And not from a place of shaming anyone. This is from a place of love and healing. I want to make sure that is understood for this podcast episode. A previous client of mine used to come to our sessions kind of frustrated. She would be frustrated, really upset about how she was being treated at work. She was one of the only Black leaders, women leaders on the job, and she was often asked to handle things like admin tasks, things like making sure people's calendars were right, or spending time making sure they had reservations when they had to do things outside of the office, planning luncheons, and those kind of things. But in decision-making times, she didn't feel valued, and she really should have been valued. Her opinion or decision should have been valued during those times. But instead, she felt dismissed and unheard, and she would come to our sessions talking about this a lot. Things like this happen all the time. I've had this experience, and I'm sure someone listening right now has had these kinds of experience. It happens often for Black women in leadership. We may have a hard time getting a seat at the table, and then when we actually get a seat at the table, it feels like we're not being heard at the table. We leave the table feeling underestimated or overpressured sometimes. Oftentimes we speak up when we're allowed or when we have the opportunity, and then we're seen as aggressive when we're actually being assertive. We are oftentimes expected to show up leading perfectly and also be holding things all together personally, keeping it all inside. So what does that equate to? That we're often leading in our space, leading in organizations and building in businesses, while also leading households, families, communities, and also carrying the frustrations of the traumas and all of these other things, the traumas of the world that constantly kind of treat us like we're not even human sometimes. So why is this important? I think the declaration, I never want to work for a Black woman again, is coming from a very real and valid experience that people are having. And like I said, you're entitled to we're all entitled to our experiences and our opinions. And I think people are having a very real experience that helps them come to this conclusion and make this declaration. However, I think that it is due to the amount of pressure, some of the things I just described, and trauma that Black women leaders are dealing with themselves. Now, as in any group, you're going to have some jerks. You're going to have some people, they're just jerks. Some people are just going to always have a RBF. They're always going to, no matter what is going on, they are probably going to be rude, right? There's some people in the world like that. But I happen to believe that generally people are good, generally people are caring, and generally people do not want to be mean to others. I think we have have groups of good, caring people who are leading, but are leading from a place of being wounded and not having a space or a place to express those things, so they suppress them. They suppress those feelings. So what does this mean? Leading while wounded. This means people are coming to work carrying all the past traumas and the tragedies and the current stressors that they're dealing with on day to day. They don't feel capable to deal with all of these things. So they just push them down and suppress them because the work has to get done. People got to get paid. Businesses have to run. Teams have to be taken care of. So we don't have time to deal with your trauma. We don't have time to deal with your stress. We don't have time to deal with the stuff that you brought in here today. Just get to work, right? However, suppressed emotions eventually leak out. This energy has to have somewhere to go. And it may look like micromanaging. It may look like over-controlling. It may look like an attitude. It may look like anger. It may look like harshness. All the things that come out that aren't pleasant to us, that's where that energy may come out. And this, many times, I don't believe it's from malice. They're usually symptoms of the burnout, the fear that people are walking around with, leaders are walking around with, the heartbreak that leaders are walking around with, lack of safe space to express those things. Because once you become a leader, people expect you to have it all together, right? So you don't have a space to air out the fact that you don't have it all together. It's coming from lack of emotional training. Lack of emotional training. Black women and many women have learned to lead by survival, not always in healing. Hello? Survival, not healing. And when you're leading from a place of survival, you're struggling, okay? When we aren't taught emotional management and we don't get the opportunity to actually practice efficient emotional management, when softness is punished and anger is our only defense, it just becomes harder to separate personal pain from the professional leadership. And you're just bringing all this stuff to work. And when that happens, we lead in a way that's not becoming. When we lead in this way, the impact is tremendous. What starts to happen is that your team feels the effect. The people that are saying, hey, I never want to work for a black woman leader again, they are feeling the effects of all of these things. It's a domino effect. Your team members become unhappy, and your turnover is bound to suffer. It's absolutely going to suffer. It really has no choice, because who wants to stay for that? Nobody's going to stay for that. The wounded leadership is going to get you things like that high turnover, low psychological safety, people not wanting to come to work, low morale, low engagement. Because remember, people may stay, but they're going to be detached because they are just not there for it. You know, that fear-based work culture, or feeling like you can't do any wrong, walking on eggshells at work. People like to detach because they're going to figure out a way to cope. People don't leave because they don't respect or like Black women. It's really because emotional wounding and leading from a place of being wounded creates toxic patterns that people just don't want to deal with. So they're going to get out, even if it's done intentionally. Even if I work for a person before where I knew how they were showing up wasn't intentional. I knew that they were a good, one of my gifts is to have like unconditional understanding and love for people. So even when you're doing me wrong or you're doing something to hurt me and I feel like you're genuinely a nice person or a good person, I can see that. I can sense that, but it doesn't change the outcome. It doesn't change that you're hurting me. It doesn't change that you're putting me in an uncomfortable position. So I usually have to do something about it, whether it's to detach or just remove myself altogether. Now, while we're saying this, I want to be clear. This podcast episode and the transition that's happening in the People Power Project podcast is not about calling Black women leaders bad. This is not a Black women leaders are bad conversation. This is an unhealed trauma makes leadership hard conversation. So what's the fix? Y'all know I don't like to just give out a problem. Just like I don't like to give the what without the how. I do not like to state a problem and don't come up with a solution. That is what we're going to continue to talk about on the People Power Project podcast. So you got to keep coming back. You got to keep coming back because you got to find out what the fix is. This is not an overnight fix. The problem didn't happen overnight. So we're not going to be able to fix it overnight. But we want to continue to talk about how emotional intelligence and emotional support are the key to leadership. We've already started talking about that in some of the other episodes, but now we're going to be talking about it from this angle. I want to help leaders continue to build self-awareness and build better teams so we can build better work environments. I want to encourage leaders to get mentorship, therapy, and coaching, and not just coaching for career skills, not just to learn how to communicate better, learn how to do whatever your task is better at work, but for emotional growth. Learn how to regulate your emotions in the workplace so leadership becomes freeing. And so people aren't afraid of your leadership or people aren't disgusted by your leadership. I want you to learn to lead from a place of wholeness, okay? A place of wholeness and not from your wounds. Okay? I want to say this. I'm not going to be before you long. Actually, we're wrapping it up right now. Black women, you are beautiful. You're brilliant. We are called to lead from a place of love, heartfelt leadership, heart-led leadership, heart-filled leadership, not just survival. And in order to do that, we have to do the healing work. You have to do it because you're bringing these things to work. And we don't always talk about this because we're always taught to leave it at the door. And I've said time and time again that this narrative to leave that what you're dealing with from home or from outside of work at home is not real. It's not real. So we have to start talking about how you heal yourself and take care of yourself. So when you're coming to work, you're not bringing the wounds and the trauma so you can enjoy your job and the people can enjoy the job with you. And you can start right now. You don't have to wait until the next People Power Project podcast episode. You can start right now. Your homework. I'm going to give you some homework. Your homework is a journal prompt. Start with this one right here. Between now and the next time I see you, get your journal and write using this prompt. Where have I been leading from survival instead of healing? And I want you to think about this thing because there is at least one space where you're getting up and going to work from a place of, and leading your team from a place of survival and not a place of healing. And if you think you could use some help answering this question or moving forward with your healing journey in general, join the People Power Project Circles coaching program, Thrive Through It, where you will learn to lead yourself through emotional storms and uncertain seasons, processing heartbreak and adversity, and design your vision to take you to the next level in your leadership, whether that means actually going into a leadership role. Because remember, being a leader has nothing to do with your title. You can be, as an individual contributor, leading in your workspace and not necessarily have the traditional leadership title. So maybe you need to go to the next level because you want the leadership title. Maybe you want to go to the next level because you want another level of leadership title. Or maybe you just want to be able to build a bigger, better team. If you want to stop waiting to feel better for things to get better and start healing while you're leading so things can actually be better, then I need you to join the People Power Project Circle so you can join Thrive Through It coaching. Just click the link in the show description or email contact@morgancareyconsulting.com to sign up today. Thank you for being here. And if this episode resonated with you, share with a friend, a coworker, or even your manager. And don't forget to subscribe to the People Power Project podcast for more inspiring and actionable episodes. Follow me on TikTok at the People Power Project and tag me with your thoughts using hashtag People Power Project Podcast. Until then, remember, people-empowered workspaces are simply the best workplaces. I'll see you next week.